What's up, sports fans? This is the Lucas Ross Sports Channel, and it's time to give you my official game preview / game prediction for the 2023 SEC Conference Championship game for the 2023 college football season between the Georgia Bulldogs and the Alabama Crimson Tide. So we're going to give you my game preview / game prediction here on this SEC Championship game between Georgia and Alabama. We're going to go through the stat comparisons here between these two teams, give you the game summary of what time the game will be this upcoming weekend, and then we'll also give you the previous game results here from their previous matchups for the 2023 season as well, and then we'll give you the prediction at the end of this video and see how the game's going to go down. So a big time SEC championship game here between these two teams. It's Alabama and Georgia once again. These two teams have a lot of history with one another, not just in the regular season but also in the conference championship, and they're playing for the SEC championship crown this upcoming weekend. So let's get right into it with my game preview / game prediction here for the 2023 SEC championship game between the Georgia Bulldogs and the Alabama Crimson Tide. We'll start with the stat comparisons here between these two teams, starting with the Georgia Bulldogs. They come into this game with a record of 12-0, so no surprise there. No losses in the regular season for Georgia. They're heading into this game undefeated. This team is averaging about 39.6 points per game. That's a very good number for this Georgia team, almost close to that 40 points mark. This is probably one of the most explosive Georgia offenses I've seen in the history under the Kirby Smart era, probably since the 2018 season. You look at the total yards per game for Georgia, that number is at 496.4 yards per total yards this year. So yeah, they're close to that 500-yard mark. Again, this is a very explosive Georgia offense. Passing yards per game, 310.8 yards per passing. Carson Beck getting it done in his first year as a starter. He's thrown 22 touchdown passes and about 6 interceptions, so he's been taking care of the football pretty well and has thrown like 3,495 yards in his first year as a starter. So he's been really good for this Georgia team. Rushing yards for Georgia, they're a pretty good running team as well, about 185.6 yards per rushing on the ground. You look in the backfield, they got DeJon Edwards in the backfield, a senior running back, about 781 yards on the ground this year, and then about 11 rushing touchdowns. So he's been having a really good season for the Georgia running back group and everything. And then you look at the offensively in the rankings here for Georgia. They're 6th on offense, and like I said, this might be the most explosive offense that Georgia has had in a very long time. And I think this is probably better than the 2018, offense that they used to have when Jake Fromm was the quarterback. And then defensively, no surprise, they're ranked in the top 10 in defense at 9th in the country. It's not the most dominant defense in the country like it used to be, but they're still a really good defense. And, Kirby Smart knows how to really get, some good defensive players on his roster and everything. So those are the stats there for the Georgia Bulldogs. Let's now go into the Alabama Crimson Tide stats. They're coming into this game with a record of 11-1. This team is averaging about 35.8 points per game, so that number has gone up for Alabama. It was a little bit low earlier in the season, the first half of the year, but Alabama has definitely improved on the offensive side of the football. You look at the total yards per game, it's at 409.1 yards per total yards now. Alabama, again, has gotten better on offense ever since, that slow start in the first half of the season. Passing yards per game, about 231.5 yards per passing. You look at Jalen Milroe, he has gotten better as a quarterback as well. He's thrown 21 touchdown passes and about 6 interceptions. I should say. And, the first half of the year, he was kind of a little bit inconsistent. But now in the second half of the year, he has definitely really improved a lot in his running ability and also his passing ability as well. And he's thrown for about 2,526 yards on the year, so that's a really decent number there for this quarterback of Jalen Milroe. And then you look at the rushing yards for Alabama. They're starting to run the football pretty well as well, about 177.6 yards per rushing. So both the passing and rushing have been so much better for Alabama these days. You look at Jace McClellan in the backfield, about 803 yards on the ground this year and about 6 rushing touchdowns. So he's been having a really good season for this Alabama team. And then offensively in the rankings for Alabama, they're like 49th in the country. Again, it might be not the most talented Alabama offense, but again, that number has definitely increased. They were sitting there, maybe back in like 80th probably on the offensive side of the football in the rankings, and now they're up there in the top 50. So Alabama's gotten better on offense. And then defensively in the rankings, they're 17th on defense, so that's no real surprise that they have a really good defense. They always have a really good defense these years, so Alabama is ranked 17th in the country. So stat comparison-wise here between these two teams, Georgia has the advantage in the total yards per game, and then they also have the advantage in the passing and rushing game. Georgia has the advantage in all the stats, but I feel like both of these teams are pretty even when it comes to these stat comparisons. So these are the stat comparisons here between these two teams. Let's now get to the game summary. So this game, this SEC championship game, is going to be on Saturday at 4 o'clock Eastern time on CBS. The game is in Atlanta, of course, in Atlanta, Georgia. Georgia, the spread's going to them about 6 points, and the over and under is at 53.5. Again, Georgia comes into this game with a record of 12-0, and Alabama comes into this game with a record of 11-1. Both of these teams have a lot of history with one another. They've met in a lot of conference championship games. They haven't met a lot each other in the regular season, but it's just been about conference championship games and also about national championships. You look at the previous, matchups over the years. Georgia obviously had ups and downs against Alabama in the SEC championship, but remember, in 2021, remember, Alabama won the conference championship. They went to the national title against this Georgia team, and Georgia got revenge on them in the national championship. So you just see how, both of these teams are pretty even. Both of these teams are pretty even. They may not be even on the record-wise, but it's really not just about the record. It's about the talent of both of these teams. Looking at the FBI favors Georgia by a slight percentage and about a slight margin in this game. You look at the FBI, they give Georgia about a 52.1% chance to beat Alabama in this game. And then for Alabama, the FBI gives them about a 47.9% chance to beat Georgia and upset Georgia as well, because Georgia's the number one ranked team in the country, and they're also the number one ranked team in the playoff rankings. Alabama is still at number 8, so we're getting a top 10 conference showdown here between these two teams. But again, this game will be at 4 o'clock Eastern time on Saturday. It's on the CBS channel. I believe this is the last time that we'll see the SEC on CBS for a SEC game on the CBS channel. And the game will be in Atlanta, so it's kind of like a home game for Georgia, but I feel like Alabama fans will be there as well. Then Georgia, again, favored by 6 points. And again, the over and under is at 53.5, so they're kind of predicting this game to be a low-scoring type game, which I very well could see it playing out that way. Let's now get to the previous game results here for both of these teams. You look at Georgia, again, coming into this game with a record of 12-0. They defeated Florida on October the 28th, 43-20. Defeated Missouri 31-20 on November the 4th. They blew out Ole Miss November 11th on 51-17 on November the 11th. They also blew out Tennessee on the road in Knoxville 38-10 on November the 18th. And then this past weekend, they had a pretty tough game against their rival Georgia Tech, 31-23 on November 25th in rivalry weekend. So those are the previous game results there for the Georgia Bulldogs. And then looking at Alabama's previous game results, they defeated their rival Tennessee 34-20, pulled away in the second half in that game on October the 21st. Then they defeated their rival LSU 42-28 coming out of a bye week on November the 4th. They also defeated Kentucky on the road 49-21 on November 11th. They defeated Chattanooga, destroyed Chattanooga 66-10 on November 18th. And they had that classic Iron Bowl game against their rival Auburn 27-24. That was a really big classic game. And that was definitely a really big of a scare there for Alabama, because what if they would have lost that game and came to this game with a record of 10-2? Not just of their record, but it also would have ruined their playoff hopes. I don't think Alabama's dead yet from the playoff in the top 4 and everything. So, yeah, Alabama comes into this game with a record of 11-1. And game result comparisons here, it seems like when Georgia doesn't play like a really big game, it just seems like they don't play their best game. And you look at those big games, like Florida, for example, they blew them out. Missouri was a pretty close game. Missouri's been a really competitive team this year. You look at Ole Miss, they had a high-powered offense, but Georgia obviously sent them, really packing, really in that game. They blew that Ole Miss team out 51-17. And then Tennessee, I thought that would be like one of their toughest games of the season, but that obviously wasn't the case. They actually blew them out 38-10. So again, when Georgia gets into a big game like this, they usually just play their best game. And then for Alabama, they got off to a sluggish start in the first half of the year, but second half of the year, I think Alabama has been so much better as of late. So these are the game results here from the 2023 regular season, but also the previous 5 5-game results here for both of these teams. Let's now get to the prediction here for the SEC Championship. So again, it's Georgia versus Alabama once again in the SEC Championship. The last time these two teams met in a conference championship game was a couple years ago. Alabama defeated Georgia pretty easily. That's when Georgia had that dominant defense and everything, but Georgia came back in the national championship and got revenge on the Alabama Crimson Tide. So again, there's been a lot of history here between Georgia and Alabama. It just seems like both of these teams are the two most high-powered programs in the SEC. Obviously, we got Nick Saban versus Kirby Smart, two great head coaches going at it here as well. How I think the game's going to go down, I think it will be a low-scoring type game. I think both defenses are pretty even, to be honest. I know Georgia's got a great offense and all, but I think it's just going to be a pretty even matchup on defensive sides of the football. I think both defenses are going to want to rule the day in this one. Maybe the offenses start to get going in the second half, but I'm telling you what, I think this is going to be a low-scoring game, and this is obviously a 50-50 game. I mean, it's a very tough game to call, but Georgia has been my pick since the preseason to win the SEC title. They've also been my preseason pick to win the national championship. And with that being said, I think Georgia survives a pretty close game here, and I think they finally get over that, Alabama hump and everything. They start to be on Alabama's level a little bit more. They're already on Alabama's level, let's be honest, but Georgia has had a tough time in the SEC championship games against Alabama, and this is probably one of those biggest games. Georgia's going to come out really fired up for this one. They did not play well against Georgia Tech, but, when they get into these big games, they're going to play their best game. And I think that defense probably makes a big stop there at the end of the day. And I think the final score of this game will be Georgia 24, Alabama 21. So this is my final score prediction here for the SEC Championship. And that is my official prediction for the SEC Championship game between the Georgia Bulldogs and the Alabama Crimson Tide. Let me guys know what you think about this game preview / game prediction. Who do you think wins it as well? Give me your prediction down in the comments below. Do you got Georgia winning it? Do you got Alabama winning it? And also give me your final score prediction down in the comments below. And thank you for watching this video, and stay tuned here for more sports content videos on my Lucas Ross Sports channel.